Joining us now for World Brief on the review of some of the headlines of today from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya from London, Charlestown, if I could use that word. Ilu Charlie.
Good morning, Rufai. Exactly. You know, I've been expecting your quips on me being here in London. I heard you say in it yesterday and many other days. And you know what? I want to challenge you to one very quick London speech test. Instead of saying in it, do you know, you can say something like, come on then, but you have to say it in a proper Cockney accent. So Rufai, I want to hear you say, come on then. Let me hear it. Let me hear it.
Come on it, mate. Come on it, mate.
We'll practice a little bit more. We'll try again for tomorrow. But good morning to all of you. It's so good to hear your voices. And of course, we're looking at stories happening across the world today. And naturally, let's start with what we've been seeing taking place on the second day of the Democratic National Convention. We did see Faith's great report, and Adesola did a great wrap just then of what we've been seeing on the second day. But definitely the highlights, the standouts, we're definitely looking at the Obamas taking to the stage and really using their influence, their popularity to sway in the direction of Kamala Harris. We also had the second gentleman take to the stage and speak to the warmer side of Kamala Harris, their relationship, how they were introduced on a blind date, how he left a lovely voicemail for her very early in the morning, and how she continues to play that, definitely working on that side of her public image. And it was very interesting to see how he was also responded to ahead of course, the heavy hitting Obamas taken to the stage. So it was very, very interesting. Kamala Harris herself was not in attendance. She has continued her campaigns across the country, especially looking at battleground states. But we do know that she was on Air Force 2, circling so that she could hear her husband's speech live. So very interesting news coming out of the DNC. And one thing that we are all aware of is that there are international and geopolitical ramifications for what we are seeing at the DNC, but also as it pertains to US politics as a whole. Now, an example of that is looking at what we're seeing in the Middle East, this ongoing latest spate of this issue between Israel and Hamas since, of course, that attack on October 7th has definitely escalated with the bombardment and a huge death toll that we see across Palestinian lines, especially in areas across Gaza. But one thing that there has been consistently calling for is the prospect of a ceasefire, of an end to the bombardment that we are seeing on both sides over in the Middle East. And there have been many repetitive calls for that. In fact, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been in close conversation with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on this very topic. And of course, as yet, no ceasefire deal has been signed, but I want you to take a listen to Judy Woodruff, a PBS reporter, and she has perhaps some reason for why a ceasefire has not yet been signed. Let's take a listen.
Thing that the Harris campaign would love is if President Biden would bring home a ceasefire in the Middle East right now between Gaza and Israel. And we know that Secretary of State Blinken is over there right now working with Netanyahu. The reporting is that former President Trump is on the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel, urging him not to cut a deal right now because it's believed that would help the Harris campaign. So I don't know where that, I don't know, who knows whether that will come about or not. But I have to think that the Harris campaign would like for President Biden to do what presidents do, which is work on that one. And maybe there's some other domestic issues that they'd like to see come home.
Well, this is the thing, right? It's very, very significant conversation that you heard Judy Woodruff say. She attributed those comments to reporting. And she says, as we just heard, that the reason why the ceasefire has not yet been signed is because Donald Trump has called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to sign a ceasefire deal because he feels as though him doing so would be them doing so under the watch of Joe Biden and, of course, during this glare of the DNC, where Kamala Harris's popularity seems to be going from strength to strength. It is very important to note that Israel has denied that such a phone call ever took place. But one thing I want us all to remember is that when Donald Trump was president, he had a very tight relationship, a very close relationship with his Israeli counterpart. In fact, when the United States moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it only strengthened the relationship between the two gentlemen. But when Joe Biden became president and Benjamin Netanyahu had to then begin negotiating with Joe Biden and speaking to him and about him positively, it's something that offended Donald Trump and broke down their relationship. So if there is an anticipation of a Trump presidency, of Trump winning this election in November, Israel, of course, will want to be in Trump's good graces. So perhaps, even though Israel has denied that that phone call took place, if we are to believe what Judy has just said, that we just heard, then there is some real life significance in terms of the geopolitics and how important this US election is to what we see reverberating around the world. Staying with Donald Trump, and he is of course continuing his quite aggressive campaigning, as you would expect at this point in the election trail. He has, as I said, been across different parts of battleground states in the United States and will continue to do so this weekend, trying to make sure that eyes and ears are back on his campaign and focusing on what he has to offer. Now, looking at that, on his social media post, he uses truth more often. You know that, during his presidency, he started this whole coin about fake news and not really trusting social media platforms. And he posted on Truth a mock-up picture of Taylor Swift, saying that Taylor Swift wants you to vote for Trump. And in response to that post, Trump says, "I accept." Now, it's very important to note that Taylor Swift, who is actually in London at the minute, she's wrapping up the Wembley leg of her Eras tour, has not endorsed any 2024 presidential campaign candidate whatsoever. But we do know in the past she has criticized Donald Trump. So it's very interesting to see Donald Trump in this way, playing as though this mock-up, this caption was true, and him saying that, he accepts what Taylor Swift is happening, even though we know that she has not said any such thing. But looking at Taylor Swift, it's very easy to understand why anyone would want her endorsement. She's incredibly popular, has a huge social tie with people around the world, but definitely in the United States, especially with female voters, especially with younger, perhaps first-time voters. So whomever she chooses to endorse, whomever that may be, will definitely see it as an advantage. But as I said, she has not endorsed anyone, and the post in reference on Trump was in fact fake. And then again, if we step away just a little bit from what we're seeing in the DNC and the Republican Party, one comment and one topic that has continued to lead the policy discussion is, of course, illegal immigration into the United States. And to that extent, we now know that the US has started sponsoring repatriation flights of illegal migrants out of the United States to Panama. They are paying for these flights, and it's part of an ongoing process to build a relationship with Panama and, of course, different South American countries, and also tackle what we are seeing with immigration. So some 30 Colombians were on the first flights on Tuesday out of the United States, again into Panama, and it's likely that this will continue, and it'll be very interesting to see what effect this will have on this Democratic ploy to stay in the White House. Again, there has been some criticism of Kamala Harris and how she chooses to handle policy, especially when it comes to immigration. So to that extent, we are seeing Joe Biden, who is still, of course, president, working on that immigration issue. And then lastly, if we come back to the African continent, we're looking now at this story that ties in Africa, but also the Middle East. And we know that in Nigeria, in Kenya, many countries across the African continent, many people leave to go to countries in the Middle East as domestic staff. Now, Lebanon, who is still also involved in this issue that we're seeing in the Middle East, has been trading blows and bombardment with Israel consistently, to the extent that the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada and France have been calling on their citizens to leave Lebanon. African workers, domestic staff in the country are finding it very difficult to do so. For one reason, domestic staff are vulnerable to what we see, what they refer to as a Kerala system, where yes, they do have the legal paperwork, the correct visas to work in these countries, but in order for them to leave, especially at a time of war and conflict, they have to secure permission from their employers, and that is something that they're finding very difficult to happen. So we are seeing more and more reports of Africans in these countries, especially Lebanon, struggling to be able to leave. One, because of what I said about them having to secure actual formal permission from their employers, but secondly, cost. The cost of transport of flights between Lebanon to Kenya, for example, is in excess of $1,000. So you can imagine that, again, this is another situation where we see global issues having an effect on Africans, on Nigerians, on people around the world, which is why looking at geopolitics and international news is so important, because it does connect all of us. So going back to you in the studio, there's a lot for us to discuss there. Let me hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up the migrant story. The migrant story, immigration was an issue in the UK elections. Immigration is a major issue in the US with the borders. By the way, I hope Kamala Harris notes statistics that show that border crossings into the United States have actually dropped under the Biden administration. So it's a major talking point as far as what's going on over in Lebanon, the repatriation in Panama. Going to Trump, the man is obsessed with Taylor Swift. He's been seeking her endorsement now for years and years and years, and it's definitely not coming. I mean, she's definitely not going to endorse him. Maybe she'll just stay out of the endorsing anyone at all. But it's so ironic that on a platform called Truth Social, he's posting fake endorsements. He started that whole thing about Kamala Harris, Detroit, Michigan rally being generated by AI. The man is nothing. He's nothing if not entertaining. But thank you for bringing up the Judy Woodruff clip on him allegedly speaking to Netanyahu and trying to tank the ceasefire. He's done this before. There was a border deal that Republicans in the Senate had already set up with a bipartisan deal with Joe Biden, and Trump called Republican senators and representatives in the House and tanked the border deal because he didn't want Biden to have a successful news cycle with the border deal ahead of the election. So it's par for the course for Trump.
All right, so two things. Still on immigration, migration, a very worrying story there from the Middle East, the Gulf states with the kafala system. And this was highlighted over 10 years ago by the United Nations through their special rapporteur on human rights, where they talked about the fact that it was tantamount to modern slavery. So what happens is that a lot of power is given to the employers, whereby employees who go to work as domestics are not covered under the country's labor laws, but have a special system called the kafala system. Now what happens then is that when they go there, a lot of power is given to the employers, and their ability to leave or even negotiate better pay and better terms of service is largely in the hands of the employers. This means that even in situations like you've cited, whereby there's a threat to life, they are unable to leave without the permission if that's not slavery, I don't know what is. And so I'm quite concerned that 10 years ago, the UN released a report that it should be done away with. Qatar tried to review it, even though it didn't make a lot of difference. But we're still having that conversation 10 years after. This is why I recall President Bola Tinubu had said that Africa must have an Africa-led solution to its problems. We have to begin to speak with one voice as a continent to be able to negotiate, especially diplomatically, and protect our citizens wherever they are around the world. The fact that these people have to live under these conditions, and of course, majority of them are from countries like for continents like Africa and Asia. Not a lot happens to the West. If not, I believe that this evil system would have been addressed and been revoked. But let me just say finally that I felt that one of the most impactful speeches at the DNC at the convention was that of Stephanie Grisham. It was if I use a damning report as to someone who worked personally and closely with Trump and his wife, and to come out with such a statement, that was a dent. He hasn't said anything yet. I'm looking forward to what his rejoinder to that particular statement of his character evaluation would be from Trump himself.
I can do a mock reaction to what Trump would say to Grisham. She's lying, she's not beautiful, she's ugly, I fired her, she's gone. But that's the kind of man you have. The same man that was caught on the phone begging people to be able to increase his vote tally? You think Trump is a sensible person? I'm not surprised that he quashed that border deal. This was the same man that did so much to destroy other people, the people that worked for him at the Trump Towers. This was the same man that has committed a lot of heinous crimes with his lawyers back in the day, Roy Cohn. So I'm not surprised that Trump can say such a thing. He's done it before in the past, he'll do it. A man that had the temerity to be able to take a Taylor Swift video and spew fake news. I'm sure his friend Elon Musk will call that free speech. A man that Kellyanne Conway worked for, that keeps on talking about alternative reality. As regards the migrant crisis, and it was a good speech by the likes of Michelle Obama yesterday, invoking the spirit of mothers, because it was a tough one. She had just lost her mother. So this was the first time she was back in Chicago after the loss of her mother, and charting a way forward for America. As regards the migrant crisis, the same leaders, like President Tinubu and other leaders, that now say Africa-led solutions are the ones that have destroyed Africa. When you check the trajectory, this was the same country. People from areas of the Middle East used to come and do domestic work in the 70s and 80s in this country. It has now flipped because of mismanagement of the economy. We are now going there to do domestic work. In Lagos in the 70s and 80s, you had Syrian traders and all sorts of people. You know why? Because the naira to the pound was close to 1 to 1. The naira to the dollar was, the economy was bustling. These were the same people that destroyed the economy of Africa. And that's why you see they are going through every part, Agadez to the Mediterranean, to go do substandard work. And these are university graduates. So Africa, my Africa, like Bragg will say, we call on the leaders to make Africa better, not just rhetoric of mouths.
Well, thank you so much, Adefemi. Always good to see you bringing us World Brief here on the morning show. See you again tomorrow.